spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't seen it and you want to see it, stay off the internet. The internet is not your friend. And I'm not just talking in relation to this movie. It's a vicious and cruel place filled with bile and hate and despair. But also it has that Singing Horse Flash minigame site from like 120 years ago. Oh my god, the time I dedicated to this. Anyways, look, since their respective universes ceased to be, I've always been curious as to what happened in the other Spider-Man worlds after the movie stopped. And now with the reappearance of both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Mans, now is the perfect time to take a look back on what they've been up to, based on what was mentioned in No Way Home, plus what was hinted at, and a bit of good old-fashioned speculation. Plus, I also want to talk about the universes of Venom and Morbius for some reason. So leave a like. Just like, yeah, there's a little thumbs up button. It's just below the video. Yeah, just towards the left. You gotta... Look, I don't have time to talk you through this. This is something you need to figure out yourself. Open up a new tab, and in that great Spider-Man tradition, run a search in Bing. Let's begin things with the universe of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, directed by that of Mark Webb. Not the best movies ever made, sure, but a lot of stuff certainly happened in those films, especially the second. There's like 4 sequels worth of content in that one. When we last left things, Spider-Man was in midair about to take on the Rhino, leaving audiences wondering whether he was stomped completely flat. But now we know that he was probably successful in that battle, even though he was a little embarrassed that whilst the others got to take on aliens, both on Earth and in outer space, he was busy fighting Paul Giamatti with a barbed wire tattoo across his forehead. That's nothing to be ashamed of, though. Sideways is a good movie, so I've been told. From there, he kept on Spider-Manning, just like Gwen Stacy would have wanted. But as mentioned, he became increasingly violent and stopped pulling his punches. Famously, Spider-Man can lift a bit over 10 ton, so every punch is like a death sentence for the person he's hitting. I mean, he probably didn't start killing his villains, but I don't know, maybe he did. It also appears as if his version of Aunt May is very much alive, because he didn't indicate otherwise, and he's also on his way to a bad back because of all that web swinging. Also, unlike the MCU, there doesn't appear to be other superpowered heroes. It's just him. However, there was a planned third movie, and some of those plot points have been revealed. The Sinister Six was said to have formed, being led by a newly revived Norman Osborn, who takes on the mantle of King Goblin. Finn Wittrock was in talks to play Eddie Brock, with maybe a small Cletus Cassidy cameo from Alan Tudyk. At a low point also, Peter Parker would have donned the black symbiote suit, which was probably taken out of that Oscorp basement of Origins, seeing as he's never actually encountered alien life before. And maybe no aliens exist in this universe. Also, that basement, that's where all the villains come from. I should also point out that none of this is even remotely hinted at in No Way Home. But he's had to have done something over the last 7 years. It was also revealed that Gwen Stacy, or a Gwen Stacy from another dimension who got bitten by a spider, would have skipped on over universes and met this version of Peter Parker. Also, she was bitten by one of those super spiders, not like a regular spider. She didn't stumble through a portal going, "Ah, I've been poisoned by a spider!" And Peter's like, "Well, technically you couldn't have been poisoned because spiders aren't poisonous, they're actually venomous. That's considered a common misconception in both spiders and snakes. So I guess for future reference, oh no, you've died again while I was explaining." Anyways, this would have been the first live-action version of Spider-Gwen that we've seen. All that seems unlikely to have happened though, because he's still a very sad boy with very nice hair. Alright, let's move on from the Mark Webb universe over to that of Sam Raimi. So by the time this Tobey Maguire version skips on over, he would have been around 37 years old, considering that he was said to have been born in 1984. So, you know, a bit younger than the actual Tobey Maguire, whom at the time of recording is 46. Somehow, he got back together with Mary Jane, despite that time he hit her in the face. To be fair though, he does say it's a complicated relationship, but they make it work. Who knows, maybe they even have kids at this point. That of course is pure speculation. His sperm could just be a tangled web of nightmares. His Aunt May is also probably not dead. Otherwise, again, I figure, you know, he'd bring it up. And his back continues to cause him some issues. Not from the time that he fell on that car, but, you know, again, because of all the web swinging. Also, like the Amazing Spider-Man universe, there is no Avengers. But that is not to say there are no heroes at all. He never mentions it, but there is some version of Doctor Strange that exists. seeing as he is name dropped in Spider-Man 2. But that could refer to like a stage magician, or a serial killer, or a serial mascot. Whatever the case is, it still seems to be that he's very much on his own. There was also supposed to be a fourth movie in that franchise, details of which are available online. And similarly to what we did with the original draft of The Rise of Skywalker, Ethan and I, but mostly Ethan, are working on getting that animated in the near future. So keep an eye out for that. Subscribe is what I'm saying. It's not just going to appear one morning on your kitchen bench. You got to work for it. I would have seen him though take on multiple villains in an opening montage, including that of Mysterio as played by Bruce Campbell, and then later on he'd face a bigger threat in The Vulture as played by John Malkovich. Anne Hathaway would also have appeared as some kind of Voltress/Black Cat combination. Also, it turns out in the new movie that he was pretty okay with being stabbed, meaning it's probably happened to him a lot since we last saw him. I think he also gets stabbed, I believe, in one of the drafts of Spider-Man 4 by the Vulture. Okay, so I just want to talk something else out, so please bear with me. It said that all these villains were pulled over into the MCU because they knew Spider-Man's identity. Okay, except Electro, he didn't know who he was. He was like, oh, I'm disappointed that you're white. Or was it only that the villains at the end battle, the ones who were threatening to skip over from their dimensions, were they the ones who actually knew? Also, it was said that those 5 initial villains that were brought over were destined to die in their own worlds fighting Spider-Man. The Lizard was turned back into a man and was locked away. And the Sandman flew off in a breeze of sandy tears. So I'm guessing that means Kurt Connors transformed back into the Lizard and then died fighting Spider-Man again a different time? But then, Tobey Maguire also made peace with Sandman in Spider-Man 3. And it seems as if they were cool with each other after he again tried to drown him in sand. Did they have another encounter in between movies where they again tried to kill each other for a second time? And another thing, when the villains get dropped back into their worlds, was it to be at the point in time where they left? Because that seemed to be Doctor Strange's plan, to just send them back and then they'd be murdered. But MCU Peter Parker's plan was to cure them and then send them back after they're depowered. But that means it's even less likely they're going to survive any of those encounters. You think Norman Osborn was going to be able to dodge that glider that he was impaled upon when he's normal Osborn? A depowered Electro is just going to be obliterated in an instant by an incalculable amount of electrical voltage. But let's say, hypothetically, they come back and all the Peter Parkers recognize, oh, they've changed. They've reformed. And so they live. But if that's the case, that would have huge ramifications for the future. If, say, a now cured Otto Octavius shows up with knowledge of Peter Parker's future. Also, would that Doc Ock then start fighting crime alongside Peter Parker? And Harry Osborn also wouldn't have resented Spider-Man for killing his father, which would mean in turn he would never have become everyone's favorite villain, New Goblin. In the Amazing Spider-Man universe, would have Gwen Stacy never have died if Andrew Garfield had the help of regular man Max Dillon against the Green Goblin? I guess that what happened was they were unceremoniously dumped back into their worlds in the modern day, with years having passed. I mean, I guess. And what does that mean for the Venom-verse? So Eddie Brock goes back to his timeline with a vague understanding of another dimension he now no longer has access to. He also didn't die in a pitch battle with Spider-Man. Unless they're going with the idea, like in the comics, that the symbiote is connected to a hive mind across multiple dimensions. So due to Venom's involvement in Spider-Man 3, Tom Hardy's Venom is subconsciously drawn to MCU Peter Parker. However, show me that leaked Sony email where that was the plan. Because quite frankly, I don't believe it. I mean, why did he even come over in the first place? He didn't know the identity of Spider-Man. He also didn't die in a pitch battle with Spider-Man. Why was he involved in this movie at all? He doesn't even have a Spider-Man. He might have a Morbius though, I think. Because in the Morbius trailer, Mr. Morbius tells a guy that he's Venom. But then he's like, nah, I'm just kidding, I'm a Dracula man. Which then means he's in the Venom-verse. But if he's in the Venom-verse, why is there this image of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man on the wall? Does that mean he was referring to the Topher Grace version of Venom? And that he lives within the Sam Raimi dimension? Because I don't think that version of Venom was widely known about. I mean, he was sort of on the news, but he was filmed from like 60 stories below at street level. Also, why wasn't Topher Grace pulled across into No Way Home? He both knew who Spider-Man was and also died fighting Spider-Man. He fits the criteria. Did the dimensional spell accidentally pick the wrong Venom? But also, in the Dr. Mickey Morbius the Dracula Lad trailer, he meets up with Adrian Toomes' Vulture, as played by Michael Keaton. So that would imply that he's actually already in the MCU. So he lives in the same world as Tom Holland. But if that's the case, why does he know who Venom is? Because the MCU doesn't have a version of Venom yet. Unless you count that time that Tom Hardy sat in a bar by himself for like a day? I can't imagine he did enough of note on that stool for him to become internationally renowned. Or maybe Morbius was brought over at the same time that Venom was. But even then, if you said to someone in the MCU, "Hey, I'm Venom," they're going to be like, "Do you mean venomous or poisonous? I don't know what you're talking about." And why is there no Oscorp in the MCU? Because Norman Osborn said there was no Oscorp. That's not like a plot hole or anything. It's just a general curiosity. Because if you remove the Osborns, not those ones, you potentially eliminate a couple of major characters in Norman and Harry Osborn. Does that mean they're instead going to make Ned Leeds the Hobgoblin instead? Like he was in the comics? But also in the comics, he actually became the third Hobgoblin, which would mean they'd skip over both Robert Kingsley and Lefty Donovan, a couple of fan favorites. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but it looked like Sandman didn't age at all. Was that because he was pulled out of time at an earlier point than Tobey Maguire was? Or was his lack of aging a result of him being a sandy man? Jesus. Time travel coupled with interdimensional travel is confusing. I'm not afraid to say it. I am happy to be asking the big questions. And I know some of you are probably thinking, "Oh, James, all this talk is just padding for time," because we know for a YouTube mid-roll to appear, a video has to be 10 minutes in length. Yeah, well, guess what? They changed that. It's now 8 minutes. I am more than 2 minutes over than where I needed to be. This isn't about ads. I mean, there will be an ad in this, but this isn't about ads. But if you would like to know my thoughts in full concerning Spider-Man, look at all these Spider-Man, we're actually covering that this Monday on our podcast, The Weekly Planet, where we talk movies and comics and TV shows. We're going to do a full spoiler review, things we liked, things we didn't, etc. and so forth. That podcast is on all major platforms, including iTunes, Spotify. It's got its own YouTube channel as well. And it actually comes up a full day early, ad-free, over at bigsandwich.co, where you can also find a bunch of bonus and exclusive stuff, including early videos and podcasts and whatever. It's like our Patreon. Thanks for watching this, though, and goodbye. Maybe forever? I don't know, let's leave it open-ended. And if fate will have it, perhaps we will meet again someday. Or maybe, click on that video about the time a bunch of Spider-Man suits were stolen from the Sony lot and it led to this huge international manhunt. It's a fun story. Okay, I'm really going this time. Goodbye.